This is episode 1157.
One of the most important things, I think, for any CFO is to embrace AI. I think the examples I've had where, it saves you hours and hours in terms of preparation or, analysis that you want to run, or comments on maybe an investor deck that you've put together and gives you some helpful thoughts. It makes you a better finance function as a result. So I think there's a lot of, AI, will it make a difference? It's certainly transforming the finance function that I work in today. And I'd be really interested in a year's time as to how it's evolved. And one of the key things I would say, if I was to give some advice, is have an AI champion within your function. We've got a couple of AI champions, some people that really are interested in it, both inside and outside work. And they come to me often with, why don't we think about this for AI? Why don't we do this? These reconciliations take us X number of hours a week. Why don't we try and use this AI? And actually, we've done that for a number of processes. I think it's giving the team enough scope to be able to do that without fear for their job security, I think, in a lot of circumstances.
One of the quiet myths about the CFO role is, of course, that technical mastery alone prepares you for the seat. Today's conversation challenges that idea head on. My guest has seen finance from both sides of the table, advising on deals and then living with the consequences of those deals inside the business. That perspective matters right now as CFOs are being asked to scale faster, integrate more, and lead through complexity without losing trust or clarity. We talk about why growth forces finance leaders to rethink structure, accountability, and even their emotional posture. Our talk with CFO Toby Driver begins after this. Hello, CFO Toby Driver is with us. Toby brings a career shaped by transaction advisory, private equity-backed SaaS, and hands-on operational leadership. After starting in audit and deal advisory, he moved into senior finance and M&A roles, guiding complex acquisitions and integrations. At Ideagen, Toby played a critical role through the company's transition from public markets to private equity ownership under HD Capital before stepping into the CFO seat. Today at Ideagen, he's focused on scaling a global GRC software platform. Toby, welcome.
Thank you, Jack. It's a privilege to join you today.
So, Toby, we always begin by just saying, hey, take a look back for us and try to identify some of those experiences you feel best prepared you for a CFO seat, let's say. Tell us what comes to mind.
Perfect. Well, I think, Jack, my finance journey probably started maybe slightly different to many for CFOs. And I think it's important for me to talk about the fact that from a very early point, and from a point that I can remember, I just loved business. Even when I was in my teenage years, I was obsessed with programs like Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, I think it's called in the US. I love reading business books. So I knew that I was destined for the world of business, and whether it was CFO or something different, who knows. And probably took a relatively unconventional route into the CFO world. When I was basically at the age of 18, kind of deciding what to do next when you finish school, and a lot of my peers were heading off to university at that time, and I really was considering what to do, and got the opportunity to do an apprenticeship, which was a real privilege at the time, to be able to go and join an accounting practice at the age of 18 and really start to get involved with a lot of senior stakeholders within organizations and get to understand business. And for me, it was a way to continue to study and be academic, but it was a way really to get involved in the world of business. And looking back at the time and kind of when I've been thinking about your question, looking back at the time, I think it was the right decision for me in terms of, I wanted those practical business skills. And when a lot of my peers were coming out of university, I was lucky enough to be coming out as a chartered accountant with a lot of good experience under my belt, whether it be across different sectors or specialisms. And, at that time, when I was training, I was within the external audit practice. So the different businesses you got to work with, I often look back at today when I'm in my CFO role as some of the things that I was able to learn. So I think that really set me off on the career trajectory I've managed to be on today. And I think one important thing looking back is the point that I wanted a quick learning curve. And certainly when you're 18, going into the world of work, going into a professional line of work, it's a very quick learning curve. It's a very steep learning curve. And certainly, again, something that I continue to remind myself about is making sure that I'm never plateauing on my learning journey, and making sure that even in senior roles today, there's so much still to learn. I think that's really important.
The door that swung open for you, and you can correct me here, but the door that seems to have swung open for you early in your career was when you moved into transaction services. And first you're at RSM for a number of years in the transaction practice there. And then you jumped to KPMG. Again, it's deal advisory. How am I doing? Am I close? Do you see that as a door of opportunity today, or how do you look at it?
Yeah, I think that was a huge door of opportunity. And if I think about the difference between an accountant and a CFO, it's really about understanding business and how businesses work. And within deal advisory, you get a lot broader view of the organization and the value drivers within those organizations. And for me, RSM, I did just under 4 years within their kind of transaction services practice. And effectively what that was is really, you are doing a financial health check for the potential buyer of these organizations. There's a significant amount of value at stake for these buyers. And for me, it was a case of really getting under the nuts and bolts of those organizations, understanding what drove them, and then taking those learnings going forward. And I think probably back to the point I just mentioned around that learning curve, KPMG was a conscious move for me in terms of the organizations that you get to work with by working for a KPMG. The breadth of organizations, the globalization of those businesses was hugely valuable and continues to be hugely valuable to me today. When I think about scaling the finance function here at Ideagen, I've seen a lot of different ways that finance functions operate through the work that I was lucky enough to be involved in accounting practice. And therefore, those things often pop into my mind when I'm thinking about what should we do next. So I think you're right. The door definitely swung open at that time. And for me, it was really insightful to be involved really at that sharp end of those business decisions.
It also brought the private equity world into sharp focus for you early in your career, I would think, as well. And I know that you step in when you jump to the operations side. It's a private equity-backed company. Perhaps no surprise.
Yeah, I think I've been really lucky in my career today to deal with the various different businesses, even not-for-profit organisations through to private equity. And the point I joined Ideagen, we were listed on the AIM market, a sub-market to the London Stock Exchange. So I've been able to see kind of different ownership types, and I think private equity for me is personally the most exciting, and it's been incredibly interesting to be involved on kind of both sides, the investing side through RSM and KPMG, but also on the operations side. I'd say, CFO roles within private equity are very much sleeves rolled up CFO roles. The board expects you to be very close to the numbers and the operations of the organization and know exactly what's going on at all times. And you need to make sure that as a CFO, and I'm sure we'll come on to some guidance for those aspiring leaders, but as a CFO, you've always got a sensible answer to the questions that you get asked, and your prep is very strong in terms of when you're meeting those private equity investors, because they are very sharp individuals.
Now, when you do come back to the operations side, I want a reality check here because just given the world you had resided in, sort of as an advisor and what have you, what did you think? What was the blind spot you only recognized once you're back on the operations side? Meaning, what didn't you fully grasp with all the deal making experience and all the understanding how these organizations have to come together? There was something from the operations side that you're like, wow, okay, this is eye opening.
I think there's a lot of things. I think as an advisor, you often look kind of outside into organizations and you kind of go, how hard can it be in a lot of respects? And I think we've all been there. Actually, when you get on the other side, there's a lot of complexities. And I'd say, sitting here today, one of the biggest ones is M&A and making sure you understand all of your financial performance post those new businesses joining your group. I think you sit on the kind of advisor side and say, well, you bought a business, all the information is there. Actually bringing two organizations together, operationally and from a financial reporting standpoint, and making sure that everyone understands what's going on within the combined business, it is very, very different to that. So I think a lot of it is the practical, how to practically implement a lot of stuff and scale a finance function rather than just saying, well, surely the report should look like this. It's very easy to say that and request information when actually the reality of it is very different. And I've got a lot of sympathy for a lot of those businesses that I worked with on the other side now.
Something I think is kind of revealing, because when we speak to people like yourself, it's perhaps not unusual for them to go the corporate development route. They land in a corporate development group attached to a company, and you didn't. You become a group controller, and that reveals something to us. It reveals that you're, well, perhaps you wanted different lines of sight into the business. Perhaps your accounting and auditing expertise was always top of mind as you were in M&A advisory. But it also means that you were perhaps patient. It's not like you were only going to step into a CFO role. No, that's not the way it happened. You step into a group controller role, you get advanced within a year or two into a senior finance, SVP, senior vice president role, and then the CFO role happens. So I see a little patience on your part. At the same time, it looks like you're really getting into operations versus the person residing in the corporate development side of the business. What, you agree or not really, or do you see it differently?
Yeah, I think I do agree. I call it my finance bingo card. It's probably not a term you've heard previously, but effectively, there's a lot of experience to be gained. And when you become a CFO, you've got a lot of different experience that you need to draw upon. And my goal was kind of always, once I'd kind of joined the accounting career, I wanted and knew that I wanted to become a CFO, and therefore collecting items on that finance bingo card was really important. And ultimately, if you're going to be a CFO, you're going to run a big finance team. A group financial controller gave me that opportunity. It gave me the opportunity to be close to some of the auditing and the stat accounting, but the breadth of the business that I joined to be a group financial controller, it also was more than that. It was a commercial role. I got to interface with a lot of senior stakeholders within Ideagen as it was at the time. So for me, it was almost thinking about, what does the perfect bingo card look like for a CFO? What are the bits of experience that you need to be able to get to be, as good as you could be at the role at the time of which the opportunity arises? And the group financial controller role was perfect for the breadth of experience and the breadth of team development. Never underestimate the value of a great team and being able to guide a great team as you grow and scale. And therefore that was a great opportunity that presented itself at the time. So although I would have considered corporate development roles, I think for me it was about thinking broader than that and slightly more longer term as to what experience I needed to obtain to really be as successful as I could be when the time arose.
Looking back, was there a career moment? What was the career moment that most accelerated your readiness to become a CFO?
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant question. And I think there's a lot of moments in my career thinking back decisions I made that helped me set it up. But I would say going back to that bingo card analogy, one area on that bingo card that I certainly felt like was missing was probably some of that operational on the ground experience rather than just finance experience. I think you could be guilty as a CFO of just being in finance your entire career, and I got the opportunity to go and work in a non-finance role, which I suppose at the time was a slightly scary thought for me in terms of you going out into the business, you're leaving the spreadsheets behind it, for want of a better phrase. And I stepped into a role to run the M&A integrations process here at Ideagen. So how we bring organizations into our business and make them part of the Ideagen family. So effectively running that integration process from soup to nuts. And it wasn't.
Can you give us an example there? That's very interesting. I'm wondering, okay, you're stepping out of that comfort zone. You're stepping into this M&A integration, maybe execution. Who's at the table with you? Who are the types of executives you are getting familiar with when you made that move?
Yeah, so effectively that role is interfacing with the CEO. So here it was the CEO of Ideagen, every C-suite member in each function as well, because effectively you're working on the integration plan for sales, for marketing, for customer, for development. You know, an area that I wasn't overly familiar with in a tech business was, you know, the technology world. How does the technology world work? How do sprint teams work from a development perspective? So for me, and then the other benefit is you're also working with the new organization that's joining the Ideagen family at that time. And it's about, you know, the key senior stakeholders within that business. So what you go from is, you know, a finance experience whereby you're spending time looking through one lens to an element of experience where you're looking through a number of different lenses around the organization, and you get to really understand how each one works. You know, customer is not just about support, it's about customer success, it's about how well we implement our solutions, and how sales works, you know, how the sales process works. I think as a CFO, you've got to understand how each of those organizations work and be able to talk to them coherently about their specialisms. So to answer your question, it was the most senior executives across the business that I was partnering with on those kind of integration plans and working out the best approaches for these organizations. And it covered all sorts of areas, you know, culture, technology, people. So when I'm making decisions now as a CFO, it helps me think sort of business first rather than necessarily finance first. And that was a massive turning point for me and really changed my perspective on a lot of things and helps me sympathize with the business when they come to me with problems today. And I think one final point I'll add is one of the things I take greatest pride in as a CFO is I think the CFO can, maybe wrong, but sometimes come across as a scary individual that people don't want to go and talk to the CFO in their business. I feel like it's important for the CFO to be well connected, empathetic with things that are going on within the business. And if people have got problems, they don't hide those problems. They come to the CFO and say, I've got this problem, how can we sort it? Or I've got this solution, what do you think? Rather than necessarily it being last minute, because bad news never gets better with time. So I like to be the CFO whereby I understand each function within our business, I understand how they work, and then as a result, people are more open to come with suggestions.
Well, that's great. Thank you. And I might have fibbed. We will have some additional career-related questions for you a little later, but right now, let's find out about Ideagen. And I think I mentioned a GRC software platform. That's my abbreviated. But, you know, tell us about Ideagen and what's the value proposition here today?
Yeah, absolutely. When I talk about Ideagen, I like to start by talking about our purpose. And the great thing about Ideagen is we have a very compelling purpose. The point to mention is we are a software business, as we've touched on. But our software underpins keeping people processes, and products safe on a global scale. And when I explain what we do, I often say, we help put safe food on your table, we keep planes in the air, we help develop life-saving medicines, and we support employers to keep employees safe in the workplace. And as we sit here today, we have around about 15,000 customers that use our software every single day, to serve around about 2 million daily users who rely on our platform to manage quality, health and safety, environmental factors and compliance across their operations. And we typically support those businesses with complex regulatory environments that are trying to navigate across their businesses. And really, I describe our software as kind of mission critical. This software means that businesses can operate in a safe environment in order to thrive. And probably my favorite gambit about Ideagen is that we're pretty confident that there isn't a single part of an average daily person's life that at some point hasn't been touched by Ideagen. If you look at, if you fly with Emirates or British Airways, or you eat Burger King or receive medical treatment for one of our 2,000 hospitals that we serve, Ideagen has played a role in there at some point.
Which customer problems perhaps most directly drive Ideagen's long-term growth?
Yeah, I think for me, it's probably the changing regulatory environment. Businesses have increasing regulations that they need to comply with. Businesses want to operate in the safest possible manner. And we help businesses do that. The other point is a lot of businesses historically have done a lot of what we provide on spreadsheets and had disconnected systems within their organizations to manage their environmental health and safety environment, their quality of product output, whereas we consolidate that into one platform for them, and we help them to become more compliant with those regulations. So the increasing regulatory burden on the business environment is a huge growth factor for us. The digitization of a lot of those processes as well is also a huge growth factor for us, as well as a growing kind of backdrop to the environment, health, safety environment.
Can you give us a sense maybe of the trade-offs that you make when it comes to resource allocation? How do you balance, growth, integration, some of the challenges out there?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question in terms of, and as a CFO, I often, you say no more than you say yes, a lot of times. And when you're looking at the budget, you're thinking about development. I think for me, it's always putting the customer at the forefront of kind of my decision making, and making sure that our products are the best they possibly can be to ensure, we go to market with the best solution to help our customers manage that regulatory burden. So really looking at areas like our development, how we're spending our development dollars, how we're looking at our go-to-market and our customer operations is really, really important. Obviously, you can't do everything, and I think it's about compromise. And we try and have a culture whereby even the functional leads, the CRO might be talking to the chief marketing officer or the chief customer officer and trading off between their necessary budgets in terms of investment allocation. So we try to have a very grown-up approach in terms of that investment that we're putting into the business. And often, I'm part of those conversations to work out how we're best to invest as an organization, but always with the customer at the forefront of our thinking.
What metrics best reflect business health at Ideagen today?
I would say we're incredibly lucky in the business model that we operate. And I'm sure, many of the other CFOs you've talked to worked in a SaaS business or software as a service, highly recurring revenue that we look at. So kind of our recurring revenue is our key metric. And then we tend to break that down in terms of our annual recurring revenue and look at things like customer retention, existing customer growth. So the key metrics I'm focused on are how well are we retaining our customers? how well are we growing those existing customers, and then what does our overall ARR book look like, as well as our average revenue per customer. And then obviously I tend to measure the majority of our cost base with reference to that ARR as well. So what proportion of our ARR are we prepared to spend on customer, on development, on sales? But the key metrics I would say are those kind of retention and growth metrics for our business.
How does finance sort of the relationship between finance and go-to-market, what does that look like today? Have you tweaked that over time? Where are your people in that conversation?
Yeah, it's definitely one we've tweaked over time, and we'll come on to talk about it in probably a bit more detail shortly. But it's really important that finance has a relationship with the organization, and there's a kind of a relatively new department in terms of revenue operations, which really looks after things like pipeline health and measuring kind of opportunities as they progress through that pipeline, things like sales forecasting, and finance are heavily involved in that process, with RevOps reporting into the finance function. So really part of my role is to challenge on the health of the pipeline, and then really think about where we can be better within that go-to-market operation. So it is about kind of using the core skills of finance in terms of analyzing data within our operations, but also then taking it and doing something with that data. And I think that's finance in total, really, is make sure that we've got all that data to our fingertips. And I often say we're lucky that we're at the bridge of the ship, we can see everything, but it's about connecting the dots within your organization. So from a go-to-market perspective, pipeline is number one, and making sure we also help them identify areas for growth, and analyze our customer revenues and really understand the trends in there, and then bring that to the forefront of our sales organization to help them be more successful.
Can you maybe reflect on for us the sort of the build versus buy trade-offs and debate that might be underway as part of a philosophy, an M&A philosophy? Build versus buy. What are you weighing?
Yeah, I think, I'm very lucky in being part of a build and a buy organization at Ideagen. We've made a number of acquisitions across the period I've been with the business, and I think a lot of it comes down to pace, in my opinion. So the pace at which you bring features, functionalities to your customers, the pace at which you expand your geographical outlook as an organization. And it's balancing pace and cost as you go through that journey. And it's what opportunities come to you as part of that build versus buy. Buying can speed your growth journey significantly, but it does come with the requirement to have a really strong integration process as well. So I think we're lucky in Ideagen that we've built a muscle memory in terms of an integration playbook. That means we know we can integrate organizations well within the business, and we've got experts within each function that allow us to do that. I think if you didn't have that, it would be some of these build versus buy decisions would be much harder as well, if you don't have that muscle memory available to you within the business. It makes it slightly more difficult, but we have built that muscle memory over a period of time. That means we're a very mature buy organization. But where we do consider, we've got the right expertise internally, or we can achieve the pace we want to achieve, we will then think about build as a strategy as well.
Are there certain M&A, professionals within the company, or FP&A, I guess, executives who participate in some of the deal evaluation, or is that a separate group? How would you organize it, just given your background?
Yeah, so we're looking at the recruitment, a lot of the recruitment we've done and I've done within the finance function, M&A is a core part of what we do as a business, and therefore having people with M&A experience is really important. We do have a separate, going back to your kind of very early point around corporate development, we do have a separate corporate development team that look after kind of the origination of our transactions all the way through to execution, but they work very closely alongside the finance organization, who will work on the kind of the forecasts for that business within Ideagen and what it will look like. So I'd say it's a collaborative effort between the guys that really execute the transaction and the guys that are going to live on the other side of that as well. Because the important part is, for me, it's only a very minor part of the process, getting the deal done. It's what are you going to do with that business once it's inside of Ideagen, and how are you going to make it part of the Ideagen family? So it's about making sure that journey of originating the deal through to getting the deal done, the relevant functions, including finance and wider, are lockstep in terms of how we operate that business within the Ideagen environment.
Just, we do want to talk to you about AI a little bit here, and we're wondering, how are the data and automation changing the way your finance team operates day to day as AI becomes more a part of it?
Yeah, I think AI is talked about an incredible amount, especially within a technology business. We've been on the AI journey for a number of years now, and I'm proud that Ideagen is embracing AI. It's not something we're doing in isolated pockets across the business. It's at the forefront of our organization, and we're not just talking about it, we are delivering. I think the watch out for finance leaders is obviously that it's an investment. So are you getting the right return on that investment, and is it making the business better? I think if you look in my domain, in finance, we've been looking at AI from a how do you transform the customer experience. Things like our credit control and our collections process, we've implemented some AI solutions there to help us improve response times and identify patterns in things like payment behavior. We're also rolling out AI tools for a lot of our finance team to improve their productivity. So things like running analysis or running PowerPoint presentations, helping with the kind of linking with that, certainly on the FP&A side. Because what I'm really looking to do with AI is release a lot of that transaction work and really get the finance team focused on supporting the business in other areas. So I feel like AI is the perfect example of that. And I think we're very lucky, and one of the most important things I think for any CFO is to embrace AI. I think the examples I've had where, it saves you hours and hours in terms of preparation or, analysis that you want to run, or comments on maybe an investor deck that you put together and gives you some helpful thoughts. It makes you a better finance function as a result. So I think there's a lot of, AI, will it make a difference? It's certainly transforming the finance function that I work in today. And I'd be really interested in a year's time as to how it's evolved. And one of the key things I would say, if I was to give some advice, is have an AI champion within your function. We've got a couple of AI champions, some people that really are interested in it, both inside and outside work. And they come to me often with, why don't we think about this for AI? Why don't we do this? These reconciliations take us X number of hours a week. Why don't we try and use this AI? And actually, we've done that for a number of processes and really reduce the amount of work we can do. And I think it's giving the team enough scope to be able to do that without fear for their job security, I think, in a lot of circumstances.
We've been speaking to finance leaders about their investments in AI and how perhaps they're willing to give a little more leeway to explore potential ideas. Have you changed your mindset relative to technology investment when it comes to AI? Do you set it apart from other types of investments?
Yeah, I think, look, it's very relevant what you've discussed in terms of, the other CFOs' views, and I would concur with that view in terms of you do have to take, because often, normally you'd ring up if you take an AI solution, you'd ring up a few customers and you'd see where they got to, and you'd get some feedback. Often that feedback is not available because this stuff really is at the kind of bleeding edge of what can be done. So I think you have to take a view, and you have to support the organization on its AI growth journey and its AI adoption journey. So I am doing that. There's some calls, but the key thing I make sure is that then I check in with those teams, or one of my business partners goes and checks in with those teams in terms of those investments. Because if you made that investment and you're now a year from that investment, you would expect to start to see something. So I think we are being a bit we are, backing it and making sure that we really put our best foot forward with those investments, but we also do expect a return. It's just about, it may take longer, but the monitoring of that continues, and making sure that the teams are aware that it's really important for us to see that. And we've definitely, the investments we made, we're definitely starting to see the value of those within the business, whether it be the way we respond, how the response times to our customers, or the more features we can roll out within our development function as a result of those investments. So that the more investments we do that start to deliver value, the more confident I become in it as well. So I think you start small, and then you ultimately start to really push that across the business.
Where do you see AI perhaps having the most immediate impact within finance?
I think within finance, it's definitely on the transactional side of things. I think when you look at it, where finance's time is best spent, I think it's best spent, say, supporting the business, running the analysis, really thinking about it. I think a lot of the transactional flows, things like cash postings, accounts receivable, those sort of workflows that are reconciliation flows effectively within the finance function, are where it'll kind of make the biggest difference. But who knows, where this will go in a number of years' time. But the immediate ones are definitely, for me, in there, and, in things like trend analysis and prompting you around performance as well. So connected to your ERP and flagging, did you know this? Have you checked this? I think is the real value, because, controls, we should never forget, as a CFO, you're the guardian of the organization, and controls are super important. Making sure that the AI helps to support those controls is also really key. And so hopefully speed up reporting. We're always looking for month ends to be shorter and results to arrive quicker. So I think that's also a great opportunity.
Would love to have you just think a little bit about, go back in time again. How do you think that person who was in the deal advisory role way back when, how would that role, what's going to change? How is AI going to change what you did back then? Is it going to be around, or is it a different?
Yeah, I think it's definitely around. I think the skills and expertise that you bring from seeing a number of businesses, you've got a lot of pattern recognition as part of those roles. I think it gets you to an answer quicker. I think often we would spend a lot of time analyzing data to get to a report and outcome for an organization. I think your ability to assimilate that information quicker and get to conclusions with large data sets across organizations, if you're performing those financial health checks, will be much, much quicker. And therefore you can add value to the client along the process. I think often what I saw when I was in deal advisory is that you would ask the client or the company you were purchasing for a significant amount of information. They would then go away and collate that information. It would come back. You'd spend weeks analyzing that information, and then you'd issue a report at the end. Whereas I think what it can give you is a bit more of a real-time review of that organization, because the longer you spend on an M&A process, the more it costs in terms of time, and more it costs the business that potentially buying it, and it's not the right decision. So I think it speeds up that kind of feedback loop very significantly. But I think ultimately businesses still need to be supported on, is what they're buying, what they think they're buying from a financial health check standpoint.
Do you think young professionals in those roles today, there are going to be fewer of them, most likely.
I think it will look very different. I think they'll be able to progress. There'll be less junior roles within those organizations and those teams. I think it's about they will move into the value add roles very quickly, and kind of the review of information rather than the production of information. But it's one I've certainly considered. Some of the most valuable aspects of my career has been, you get the box of receipts from the plumber who needs help putting together his set of accounts and making sure that you understand how a set of accounts work, and then all the way through to kind of analyzing trends. So I think we just need to think as an accounting profession how we replace some of those skills and how we make sure it's not lost, so that ultimately everyone understands the outcome of what the numbers mean, because those foundational skills stay with you throughout your whole career. Regardless, like as a CFO, you don't tend to use those skills very often, but you know where to challenge and prompt as a result of it. So I think the roles will look different. I hope we'll be able to maintain the kind of same level of investment from the accounting firms into the profession, because ultimately every business needs some form of finance function, which is often heavily generated by some of the big accounting firms bringing that talent through. So yeah, we'll see where it goes, but that's my prediction.
Indulge me here a little longer, just knowing that you understand that practice area so well. Would they become more focused on cultural challenges? I mean, you've mentioned culture, business culture. So often when you do the outreach and you realize that the head of sales in one organization has just a different philosophy than the head of sales in another, and there lies the integration. The numbers look great, but the way of the whole approach was different. So how do we reconcile this if we're acquiring this company? I mean, is that where the opportunity might lie for human discussion and analysis?
Yeah, I think there's always place for the humans to have an opinion as well. Often, within advisory, what a client's looking for is an opinion from you. So I think your ability to give an opinion with all of the data and facts you've seen, you can just do it quicker. I think the cultural element's really important. I know that the kind of the advisory firms have teams that deal with those specifically. And I think that's where, if I look back at some of my best days, within practice, was when you go out to these businesses' sites and you go for a walk around the manufacturing facility and you really get a feel for how they operate that organization. And especially if it's a recurring client of yours that business is likely to be purchased by, I think then you do start to get a feel for whether they're going to gel together. And, what I'm looking for as a CFO from an advisor is often an opinion. What you've spent time with this business, you know us as an organization. What do you think? What would you do? And I think they're some of the most valuable bits of advice you get. So the more they can do that, the better, certainly for their clients on the other side.
Great. Thank you for that. Great insight for us. Hey, we are up to what we like to refer to as our finance strategic moment. And this might have happened anytime during the course of your career, Toby. And we're looking for really just a moment of insight that you experienced, changed the way a transaction went down, whatever it might be. What comes to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
Yeah, I think probably for me, Ideagen, the business that I'm in today, has grown significantly. From when I joined the business at around about 50 million ARR, we're now five times bigger than that as we sit here today. And probably one of the biggest strategic challenges we had was, as the business gets bigger, the way you operate and run that business is very different. If you try and run a big business, you lose a lot of the detail within it. And we often sat around a table as an executive team and think about how do we make sure that we take care of this entire business and all its parts, because the sum of all its parts is the value of the organization. So I think for me, it was splitting the organization down into the right components. And we went with various different models through the different sizes of the organization. But for me, it was when we moved to the regional model. And the regional model effectively was splitting the organization into 3 key operating regions. So we took a large business and we really made sure that we got people that woke up every day thinking about that specific part of the business, rather than thinking about this big business that effectively you couldn't get your arms around. Is thinking about the business in small enough chunks so you could really get your arm around it. And in finance, we were instrumental to designing how the business should work through that change, and thinking about things like reporting structures and management information and how we partner. But for me now, I think, it's a big moment, because ultimately as a CFO, you want individuals in your business accountable for different areas of performance. And if we hadn't have made that shift, it becomes very difficult to hold leaders to account in terms of their different areas. So making sure you make that strategic shift at the right time was really, really important for us. And it's an incredibly difficult one to achieve. But off the back of it, we are in a very strong place as an organization.
Clearly, you had been at Ideagen for a number of years already. You are very familiar with the C-suite, but there must have been something as you take on the CFO title. I didn't expect this. Something come to mind? What is it that you might not have expected about the role?
Yeah, I think the number one that comes to my mind is how heavy you wear the responsibility. And I think for me, in any role, but specifically in a role where you feel an incredible amount of responsibility to the organization, it's the peaks and the troughs, the highs and the lows that come with such a role with such responsibility. For me, it was about kind of not celebrating the highs too high and not getting too down with the lows. And I kind of think of it as a bit of a chart, and drawing a line through the middle of that chart to keep yourself on a kind of a stable wavelength. But I think you learn that pretty soon. As a CFO, you get a lot of problems come to you, or a lot of areas of opportunity that you need to look at. And I think it's about just making sure that you're always cool, calm and collected in any conversation, and you really put your thinking hat on, which is difficult to do in some emotional circumstance. But really, to anyone that is stepping up for that first time, I think the biggest thing I learned, and I would say I learned it in week 3, was kind of keep yourself on that even keel.
Like that. We always like to ask our guests to reflect a little on the personal side. You've been there a number of years, 5 years or more?
Yeah, 5 years.
What is it, though, that your colleagues might not know about you?
Yeah, I think in terms of the personal side, I think I'm a pretty open book. I think everyone would say, with Toby, you get what you see in terms of my approach. I think there's very little they don't know about me. I think we're one of the great things about this business and other business I've been in is the team, and making sure that as a team you really know each other on that personal level. And I think we professionally challenge each other, but we also have strong personal relationships. So I wouldn't say there's anything in particular. I'd say I'm a pretty open book from that perspective, which goes back to my earlier point around, I think if you're a transparent leader within a business, you hopefully get transparency back, which is exactly what you expect.
I too many CFOs have told me they're an open book, by the way, Tony. I just don't believe it. I'm going to share something with the audience because I really can't figure this out. Your wall covering, what is that?
It looks like
right behind you.
It looks like I'm in the jungle, doesn't it? I wish it was. I've been asking the team to change it for a number of years, but I think it's stuck as a little bit of a running joke now.
What about a book or a resource?
I think, look, Ben, my CEO, talks a lot about, he uses the term leaders are readers. And I love that term. It kind of sticks with me. And I've got a bookshelf actually by the side of the wallpaper is a very big bookshelf around some of the books that I love to read. I think, with one, if you were to ask me for one recommendation, it would probably be the book Good to Great by Jim Collins. I think it's
what is it about that book? And I have to press. What is it that get the right people on the bus?
Yeah,
I mean, there are these. Some people don't know where that came from. That came from this book, Jim Collins, Good to Great. But what is it? Why is it lasted? Again, you're talking about a book that's at least 20 years old. It's probably more. I don't know.
Yeah, it's absolutely
Over and over.
timeless. I think, there's a number of concepts in that blog talks about kind of the flywheel concept and captures how building momentum. And I think for me that certainly as your business is growing and scaling, the flywheel concept is really important. It's about building momentum, not one single big push. You just need consistent execution. And one of the things I learned really early on in my journey was that business is never finished. There's always something to do, or there's always something more you can achieve. And I love those concepts, and the other point is people. Businesses are people, and making sure that, you get the right people, working in the right way. And we often, is really, really important. And I think for me, that is team is number one. I think I listened to another one of your podcasts. I can't remember who it was with now, but effectively they talked about the fact that I think it was Perk and it was Roy, and it talked about team. And as a CFO, you need to enjoy working with people. And I think that book encapsulates that as well. It's, as a leader, you need to get the right people on the bus. You need to make sure you look after your team and you develop your team. And I've been really lucky that, the CFO I worked for previously, really helped to develop me and bring me along. And that's my duty as a CFO now.
Can I ask you a follow-up question there? Because I think you pointed out something interesting. For many people in finance and accounting, the ability to work as a team member, the ability to socialize with others sometimes is not looked at as a priority. They have other, technical knowledge is the concern perhaps. And you have to acquire a taste for it. You have to tell yourself sometimes, I'm not wasting time here talking to my fellow team members around the table about the game last night. We are, this is important. I have to get to know them better. We have to, get motivated together.
Yeah, I think it's the most important thing, right? Building a team, and building a team is the thing I'm most proud of, here at Ideagen, is building a team that can really deliver results. And, we like to say that our bar is very, very high. But in order to achieve a high bar, you've got to have a team that get on and know each other and know what each other does. And I think finance, if I look at the different aspects of my team, you've got a financial reporting team, you've got an FP&A team, you've got an operational finance team. All of these guys are looking for common outcomes and need to work together because A relies on B, relies on C. So I think that is really important. And you spend a lot of your time at work. And I think it's really important that when you're at work, you enjoy it as well. And, one of my non-negotiables in work is that you come to work and you enjoy it as much as you can do. I don't think it should be something that you dread. I think it should be an environment you enjoy coming into, and therefore you do your best work when you're at that level. So I think for me, I've always enjoyed work. I've always enjoyed who I've worked with, and that's the team culture and ethos that I've really focused on trying to drive within the roles that I've conducted.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. We are up to our final question, Toby. You'll be relieved to know. And we always end by asking you to look forward. And what we want to know are your priorities for the coming 12 months as CFO of Ideagen. What would those be?
Yeah, I think, look, as a CFO, we should always be looking forward, right? And looking ahead next 12 months, my priorities really center on supporting the growth of the organizations, making sure we continue to scale and grow efficiently, making sure we continue to support our customers. Since 2022, we've had a significantly accelerated growth trajectory. I think it's fair to say we're not slowing down anytime soon. So although it's slightly boring to say, I think more of the same from Ideagen standpoint, but from an Ideagen standpoint, that is, we've achieved a lot in a short space of time, and we want to continue to do that. And, we want to continue to be a driving force within the environment, health, safety, and quality compliance software space, and support our global customer base. So for me as a CFO, it's about enabling the business with that, investing in the right areas, making sure I continue to challenge the business. I see two key things for CFOs is challenge and support. Do I challenge the business in the right way, but then do I support them when they have, issues or come up against blockers that we need to help move out of the way? So more of the same, challenge and support, and really focusing on our customers.
Toby Driver, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thank you, Jack.